And now, our watch has ended. In playing the Game of Thrones, did series showrunners David Benioff and D.B. Weiss win or die? Did they stick to King's Landing or did they fumble like Jon Snow in Battle of the Bastards pile-up? Join ScreenRant as we dissect the last season of Game of Thrones and determine how Game of Thrones may have lost the final battle but still won the war. And if you haven't had the chance to catch the finale just yet, be warned. There's more spoilers here than there is gold in the Iron Bank. Our dearly departed Ygritte often said,
"You know nothing, Jon Snow."
But oh, how the tables have turned. Maybe one of the biggest twists of all is the fact that Jon Snow is one of the few surviving characters to find out how Game of Thrones ends. Too bad it didn't end too well for him. The guy's given his life and then his next life for the realm. After being treated like garbage by Catelyn Stark for his bastard status, being sent off to the Wall to join the Night's Watch,
and now my watch begins.
Going undercover beyond the Wall with the Wildlings, losing the first love of his life while fighting against her for the Seven Kingdoms, going against the Night's Watch popular opinion and providing safe haven to the Wildlings, literally getting stabbed in the back, front and side by his own men, coming back from the dead only to fight some more, becoming a rightful leader of the North only to fall in love with the Dragon Queen, only to find out that she's his aunt, only to find out that he's the true heir to the Iron Throne, only to pledge himself to the Dragon Queen anyway, only to watch her go all Mad Queen on thousands of poor people, only to usurp said Mad Queen, only to be banished to the North. The guy's had more tragedy and tough decisions on his resume than Daenerys has titles.
Protector of the Seven Kingdoms, the mother of dragons.
And perhaps that's the root of one of several gripes fans generally have over the close of this series. Jon Snow may not have been the most interesting or exciting character. He may have made a lot of bad decisions and awkward romantic choices, but he often made the best of the hand he was dealt. As a culture, we've been weaned on high fantasy, and we're used to the hero's journey.
For Frodo.
The mainstream success of Star Wars in the mid-70s solidified audiences' expectations for fantasies to give us a relatable hero with a simple story.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Jon Snow was our closest connection to a hero that everyone could get behind. And for many others, Daenerys also served as the heroine of our dreams. Although she tended to have more victories than her nephew, she too struggled against seemingly insurmountable obstacles. So when both of these characters, the two people in the realm with the best competing claims to the Iron Throne, were revealed to be red herrings and ultimately lost the big game, fans were naturally upset. Daenerys may have realized her dream in becoming, for a very short time, the most powerful person in Westeros. As for Jon, he managed to end up in one of the few places where he was able to share in true happiness, north of the Wall, free of the squabbles over the throne. But as the man with the best claim to the now melted Iron Throne, it's frustrating to many viewers. The showrunners would likely argue that this fate best fits the themes of the show. But many fans would likely respond saying Game of Thrones owed its viewers a more satisfying climax, and/or something more in line with all the convoluted fan speculation that's been prevalent throughout the interwebs since George R.R. Martin first started writing about the Starks, the Lannisters, and the rest. Perhaps the biggest twist of all was how easily everything seemed to fall into place after Daenerys' death. Critics of the show might point to other missteps in the 8th season that would allow for this type of ending. With Daenerys out of the picture and the Iron Throne melted down to scrap, a council of lords and ladies assembles in the Dragon's Pit near King's Landing to decide on the future of the realm. They basically come up with an oligarchy in which the lords and ladies decide the next ruler of the realm to be Bran the Broken.
All hail Bran the Broken.
It's a poetic ending for the character who was hurled out of a tower in the first episode. Yet, despite all the magic we, the audience, saw, and despite his gifts of foresight of which Sam, Tyrion, and his close family members are aware, nobody else in the realm has really seen Bran be anything beyond a weirdo who speaks in riddles. This guy, who usually just stares off into space, is the council's unanimous #1 choice for king. This guy, who didn't have it in him to rule the North a few episodes ago, easily accepts the crown.
I don't really want anymore.
You'd think the council would be made uncomfortable by the fact that the Stark family also rules the North through Sansa. If this is supposed to be Westeros' first stab at a medieval democracy, it seems like they're a little too willing to give power to the wolves. Speaking of overlooked storytelling decisions, if the Dothraki and the Unsullied were so willing and eager to level King's Landing in the name of their queen, how come they let Jon Snow live? And the same goes for Cersei in Season 8's 4th episode. Why didn't she just shoot all of her enemies when they stood at the gates of King's Landing? Sure, it's a dishonorable thing to do, but Cersei's the same woman who blew up a church just a season and change prior. It's out of character for her to not shoot everyone with dragon-sized arrows. While a good finale leaves us wanting more and refrains from answering every question, this 8th season seemed to have too many gaps in logic. Another show could easily dismiss complaints like these as nitpicks, but Game of Thrones used to be so careful in the way it told its stories. But the cracks in the show's foundation were more visible in the final 6 episodes. Daenerys' heel turn in the penultimate episode, The Bells, was shocking and disturbing. The director of that episode ably told the story of the fall of King's Landing in breathtaking aerial shots and brutal battle scenes. But many of Game of Thrones devotees don't accept this turn in Daenerys' character. Because while she had always been merciless when punishing her enemies generally deserved it. They either conspired to betray her or were literal warlords and slavers. Dany never seemed to take out her anger, frustration, and self-righteousness on the lower classes, and the determined destruction she brought to King's Landing seemed out of character. The final episode of the series did its best to justify this moment, but the character shift for Daenerys just happened too quickly. In another season, a character's descent into madness would take place over a period of months, through the course of several episodes. In Game of Thrones' 8th season, Daenerys went from Liberator to Mad Queen in the several days between episodes 4 and 5. Similar complaints can be made of the Battle of Winterfell in the 8th season's 3rd episode. Aside from complaints over the episode's lighting, the shocking turn that Arya is the one to defeat the Night King turned the series' dynamic on its head. For years, many fans figured that the Night King and his army of undead would be the big bad of the series, yet that turned out to be a big fake-out. We all watched Arya train as a faceless man to ultimately defeat death. But if this truly was the fate of the Night King, then what was ultimately the point of his character? To many, the Night King and the others were an allegory for the more permanent threats to humanity: natural disasters, environmental catastrophe, disease, and poverty. Problems that require unity to be overcome, but which go on being ignored in favor of power struggles between selfish leaders. This metaphor for the Night King was turned on its head when Arya defeated him. Then our heroes turned their sights on Cersei, and later Daenerys. This decision makes you wonder why we spent so much time dwelling on the army of the dead and their march south for so many seasons. Game of Thrones does a great job of giving us motivations for even the most unlikable foes.
You've always loved your children.
So wouldn't it have been the ultimate Game of Thrones move for the Night King and the others to become somewhat more relatable? To give us a better understanding of their march south beyond the fact that there's some evil force that we don't understand? Whether the others end up being more significant in the books or not, there just wasn't the time this season to give them their due. And that's a complaint that's been making the rounds, even from the mouths of the cast themselves. Kit Harington described the season in one word as
Disappointing.
And Emilia Clarke gave another interviewer a wide-eyed, facetious review of the best season ever, as if she could feel the dragonfire heat of the fan backlash. In fact, most cast members seemed disappointed or disturbed by their characters' destinies. The rushed pace not only hurts the characters, it hurts the believability of the plot. The biggest departure of the show from the books is simply the style of storytelling. George R.R. Martin has long said he prefers to write his yarns the way a gardener tends to his plants. Martin plants the seeds of his characters and watches them grow in a carefully constructed world. This creates an organic and often surprising experience. It makes moments like Ned Stark's death and the Red Wedding seem that much more shocking, because they come from natural confrontations that brew between contrasting characters existing in the world he created. Twitter user Daniel Silvermint has gained some traction recently for plainly explaining how Martin's pantser style varies from David Benioff and D.B. Weiss's plotter's mentality. By pantser, Silvermint explains that Martin writes by the seat of his pants, making discoveries as he goes. Benioff and Weiss are plotters through and through, meticulously outlining the events of Game of Thrones' endgame as they wind down the story. Once they outpaced George R.R. Martin's writing, they steered their characters toward a climax. The change from this style of cause and effect plotting made characters seem less complex, independent thinkers, and more like pawns in a Game of Thrones being played by higher powers. With a more simplified plot and a breakneck sloppy pace, fans were just generally thrown off by the last episodes of Thrones. A seeming disregard for long-debated prophecies, like what was the deal with the Valonqar that was supposed to choke Cersei? Didn't help either. Would it have all landed better if the individual stories in the final season were more unified? Would fans have preferred an ending where the different houses of Westeros tore each other apart before they faced the Night King in a final showdown? Would a more classically tragic Hamlet-styled ending been preferred, in which the major players were all trapped together grappling against each other in some kind of war of words or trial by combat? Will the ending we got eventually become widely accepted as the best possible finale for a complicated series about complex people? Did the showrunners make the right decisions? As Tyrion says in the final episode,
Ask me again in 10 years.
Whether you feel spurned by the showrunners or you're pledging fealty as a bannerman of Benioff and Weiss, ScreenRant will always be here with the latest Raven to keep you in the know. So hit that subscribe button, join our forces, and keep watching for more videos like this one. See you around.